I want to tell you about a Doom WOD that made me feel a lot of things this year. I Can't Give You Anything is a set of 29 maps for Doom 2 that was released by FIREBLU, with guest maps from several friends, in August of 2023. Just from seeing the screenshots, I know I had to give it a shot. Anyone who appreciates the colors black, purple, and fire blue that much is cool in my book. This channel is a FIREBLU friendly zone. If you do not like FIREBLU, log off, I don't want to hear from you. What I found when I started playing I Can't Give You Anything turned out to mean more to me than I expected it to. I'd like to share that with y'all today. I'm Juliet Necro, a goth trans dork who makes videos for other goth trans dorks. Stay a while, won't you? Maybe subscribe? I'd love it if you did. That way you won't miss out whenever I want to tell you about really cool Doom WODs or other such things. I play Doom a lot in my spare time, though I have a terrible habit of not actually finishing the map sets that I start playing. I particularly enjoy playing a few maps of Doom as a way to relieve stress. It's part of the reason that I refer to what goes on in my head as the anxiety demons. What better way to deal with anxiety demons than to fight some computer demons instead? The familiarity of the mechanics and aesthetics makes it comfortable to revisit any time, and I've been feeling a need to relieve stress pretty strongly lately, for a variety of reasons that I don't need to get to just yet. I first tried I Can't Give You Anything during the summer when it was initially released, but wound up coming back to it during an intense period of time in November and blasting through the whole thing. It's extremely rare for me to finish a whole WOD, start to finish, in 2 days like that. It compelled me like very few WODs do, and it's the only one where I felt the need to reach out to its creator to know more about it. I want to tell you why, and maybe share more personal feelings in the end. If you've been watching your screen during this video, then you can probably see this WOD is quite different looking than your average user map. Most maps still owe a lot of aesthetic loyalty to the iWODs, Doom, Doom 2, and Final Doom. Of course, it helps that you have access to those textures by default when map making. Each of those iWODs have their own visual style, but they're all more similar to each other than they are different. I Can't Give You Anything has a different approach, and shows that sometimes beauty can come from bending and breaking the unspoken rules when making art. Most of the maps in I Can't Give You Anything have single-color textures spread out over very wide areas, whereas most screenshots of Doom look like a place that could hypothetically exist with some imagination. I Can't Give You Anything chooses instead to go the other direction and create maps that aren't even recognizably places at all. They simply are. There's something so pleasant, yet simultaneously unnerving about the endless purple voids, or endless red voids, or endless white voids, or endless black voids. When you open up a Doom mapping program, your impulse will be to make something that looks like a room, and probably one that looks like something from an iWOD. It takes some courage to not do that. One of the linchpins of the aesthetic of I Can't Give You Anything is the use of the Hall of Mirrors effect. The Hall of Mirrors effect occurs when a wall in a Doom map doesn't have a texture assigned to it. Because the game doesn't know what to put there, it just shows previous frames, leading to a strange and somewhat unnerving smearing effect. One of the most basic rules of conventional Doom mapping is please texture every surface in your map. It's subtly reinforced by map editors. For example, in Doom Builder X, when you leave a wall untextured, you get these bright red walls with exclamation points on them. Seeing a symbol like that begs our brains to correct them. For most conventional looking maps, it really does behoove you to put a texture on every visible surface. However, choosing instead to leave surfaces untextured, to embrace the Hall of Mirrors, is still a choice that's always available. When creating art, there are often elements that people are told not to include for aesthetic reasons, but these are still aesthetic choices that are always available. If nothing else, it will make your art stand out, and you'll find people out there who find it as beautiful as you do. Making an unconventional aesthetic choice like this can take some guts, because it will open you up to the ridicule of the mainstream, but it's admirable in my view. In any case, I Can't Give You Anything finds a lot of beauty in the Hall of Mirrors effect. When I spoke to FIREBLU, she put it this way: I think there are a lot of people who write off any case of a Hall of Mirrors as lazy or bad design, but it's a pretty fascinating effect in my eyes. It lets you almost paint the background yourself. You can actually see in the footage right now that when I was playing map 2 of this set, I came independently upon the same thought. I was shooting BFG blasts, which have a gorgeous purple and black color scheme in this WOD, at the Hall of Mirrors just to see if the imprint my bursts left behind. I was making splatter paintings on the blank canvas of the void. You particularly generate cool images by dying in this WOD. When you die, obviously the game comes to a complete stop. Then, when you live again, the moment of your death is frozen on any Hall of Mirrors effects that you can see upon respawning. Then, when you start moving again, the image gets wiped away instantly. There's beauty in that impermanence. When I see these strange, impressionistic paintings of Doom monsters, explosions, and the color purple, I wish that I could mash the screenshot key on every single frame. I suppose that in a way, each image I made playing the game is preserved now in the video footage you're seeing. I wonder if in some way I've diminished these paintings I've created by accident by capturing some of them for posterity. Also, since Doom's palette has a lot of oranges and reds, and this WAD's palette has a lot of purples and whites, many of the Hall of Mirrors images you make are accidental lesbian flags, and I think the use of Hall of Mirrors is justified for that reason alone. There are also more ways that I Can't Give You Anything reflects exceptional minimalism and visual extremity. When a wall is textured, it's often textured with a very bright solid color, or maybe with FIREBLU. The title I Can't Give You Anything is derived from an untitled painting by Adam McEwen, and an edited version of the painting serves as the title pic of the WAD. Mary also told me some of the other aesthetic sources. Generally just visual, overwhelming art I've seen around on places like Co-Host or Tumblr or whatever. Glitch art, minimalism, data bending, visual collage work, heavily filtered/edited photography work, and also cited musical artists including Unwound, Everyone Asked About You, and Motorpsycho. Lastly, she cited a few Doom influences, like One Bad WAD and Candlemass. One Bad WAD rules, by the way, y'all ought to play that one too. I think it's pretty telling that both in her answers to my questions and in the info text file that comes with the WAD, Mary said that influences came more from outside Doom than from within it. I hope you'll permit me to get up on a soapbox for a minute here. The most interesting art comes from a wide variety of experiences and sources. Do you remember that one meme that made the rounds of Hayao Miyazaki reportedly saying, "Anime was a mistake"? Well, when I looked into what he was actually saying in that interview, I'm inclined to agree with him. What he actually said was that a lot of anime feels hollow and unmemorable because the creative teams behind them don't draw on anything besides other anime for inspiration. It's pretty much the same tropes and slightly different combinations over and over. In a former life, I used to be on a podcast reviewing anime with a couple of friends, and we ran into this often. The most interesting art comes from a wide variety of sources and one's less obvious. Usually it's pretty easy to tell inspirations across the same medium, but bringing in outside experiences is what creates really striking works of art. The best art, to me, makes you feel like you understand who the people who made it are as people for having experienced it. It's why, in my view, algorithms that scrape previous art as part of a dataset will never create any great works of art. They can only put together what's come before. They lack the long lives that humans have, where we take in a lot of ideas and let them stew in our own unique heads. That's one thing Miyazaki and I agree on, despite the fact that I'm not a huge fan of his movies. I think the fact that Mary was inspired more by music than anything else is why this map set stuck with me so much. Music can't give you a Doom map layout, but it can give you a feeling that you can attempt to convey through Doom mapping. It worked. I find a lot of these maps more emotionally affecting than most things I've played, and that was exactly as Mary intended. When describing her goals, she said that she made these maps to cultivate a very specific mood. Most of the time, this mood was intended to be one of intense anger, pain, or melancholy, mixed with disorientation or confusion. The fact that these maps are first and foremost meant to convey a feeling, rather than tell an explicit narrative or gameplay concept is really special. Mary stressed to me that her intent when creating this mod was not at all to create another Lilith.pk3. This must be a frustrating comparison because it feels extremely reductive. Some people don't want to engage with art, so they just want to sort it into a category as something they think it looks like. Having played both I Can't Give You Anything and Lilith.pk3 and loving both, I think anyone who calls I Can't Give You Anything the quote, new Lilith.pk3, end quote, has probably not played either of them. It's reductive, inaccurate, and frankly a little disrespectful to both works. I think there are a lot of interesting comparisons that could be made between the two, as Maribo pointed out to me, but just calling it new Lilith.pk3 gets none of them across. For what it's worth, the feelings that Mary intended to convey made it to me. It's more emotionally effective than anything I saw at the Louvre, honestly. And even aside from how emotionally affecting they are, it takes a great mind to devote 9 whole maps of a 29 map set to your love of goth girls. That's a more touching tribute than just about any I've seen elsewhere. Okay, I'm climbing down from the soapbox now, but that really needed to be out there in the world. I also have come to enjoy minimalism more and more as I've gotten older. I've come a long way from my high school days, where if you asked who my favorite artist was, I would have said Jacques-Louis David. I was such a little dweeb when I was a kid. I want to go back in time and shove myself in a locker so bad. These days I count names like Mark Rothko and Barnett Newman among my favorite artists. I acknowledge that those are kind of basic choices as far as minimalism goes, but I'm still exploring this area of art. Thank you to Maribo for informing me about Adam McEwen, by the way. In my personal experience, when I have a look at a really minimalist painting, I find the challenge of interpreting it to be part of the fun. There's no mystery to what, say, a painting from one of the Baroque masters means. Representational art has a lot of symbols that guide our brains to meaning. When you have a look at a painting without that degree of representation, you get to do more of the work of filling in the details yourself, interpreting the meaning for yourself, and comparing your own interpretation to that of the artist is part of the fun. Also, I have grown to love minimalism due to how angry it makes some people. Please take me on a date to the art museum is what I'm saying, and when you do, please be patient with me while I read all the placards for the paintings I find interesting. I can't give you anything's maps are minimalist not only in aesthetic, as I've discussed, but also in level design. A lot of the maps feature a completely flat area accessible to the player. They do often feature pillars that either break up the landscape or have monsters on top of them, but there's usually no way for the player character to access them. This is particularly notable since what set Doom apart from its predecessors was the addition of a sort of Z-axis. For that reason, it's considered good form in conventional map design to include some degree of verticality. I can't give you anything bucks this trend, like so many other trends, in favor of visual simplicity. Some of the maps in I Can't Give You Anything have entirely untextured outer edges, leading to the whole horizon being taken up by a gigantic hall of mirrors. The whole map takes on an eerie, surreal quality. There are vanishingly few doors in this entire wad. Instead, wide open space rules the day. One of my favorite maps in this entire wad is Map 10, Goth Girl Souls. All this map features is a small, flat, rectangular area with a berserk pack. On the other end of the room is a cyber demon. The obvious implications are that you should try and punch the cyber demon to death. The Hall of Mirrors is applied more subtly on this map than it is in most. The walls are stripes between untextured surfaces and purple or black surfaces, meaning that the map doesn't start to take on as much visual flair until you start actually punching the cyber demon. Then, once you do, you're painting the walls with your violent hands alongside the demon. I find this map earnestly serene. I come back to it often as a way to relax. The MIDI on this map helps a lot with that too. Map 10 is one of my favorites in this set because its gameplay and aesthetic minimalism are both beautifully interwoven here. Also, I'm like 90% sure that the flat that makes up the entire floor of the room is a tessellated drawing of a butt, and if so, that's rad as hell. I Can't Give You Anything has quite a few more text intermissions than your typical Doom WAD. Normally a WAD's text intermission gives you some context about the story. It's a way for Doom to have some semblance of a narrative. Frankly, I think most WAD's text intermissions are a bit overwritten, probably because the ones in the iWADs are, and WAD authors tend to want to follow suit. I tend to prefer when authors use them for a different purpose, such as Going Down, which uses them for comedy by having Doomguy get calls from his mom over the course of the WAD's events. I Can't Give You Anything turns them to a different end. The first text intermission comes at the end of Map 1. All it says is, "I'll be good to you." It's a simple promise without context. It's then undercut by the next words on screen being the title of Map 2, "I Can't Promise That." Then Map 2 begins, and it's a long, empty white hallway. It's so long, so white, and so empty that you won't even feel like you're moving for most of it. Without head bobbing turned on, you might not be able to tell at all. All you can do is careen down the hallway listening to the MIDI. All of this combined, between the promise that gets undercut right away and the unconventionality of the map, makes me feel a profound melancholy. Doom is sometimes quiet, sometimes confusing, most often violent, but this is one of the only maps I've ever played that felt melancholy. For that I prize it highly. If you don't mind me spoiling it, Everyone Asked About You, the last map not made by a guest mapper, is very aesthetically similar to I Can't Promise That, but with what can be interpreted as a happy ending. When I saw it, it made me tear up a little bit from joy. I know, I'm a bit of a softie, but that's fine. Don't worry though, there's still a lot of adrenaline in this WAD. You'll know as soon as you load it up, because this WAD only has one difficulty setting, which has been changed from ultra-violence to most violence. You're probably going to want to turn down the volume a little bit if you're wearing headphones, because a good chunk of the maps in this WAD start with several hundred revenants seeing you all at once and screaming. When these maps aren't really small, they're really big. Monster counts are often 4-digit figures. Many of the maps also employ some trickery that gives you infinite cell ammo, so the action becomes Doom violence pushed to its extreme. You're gliding along, slicing through swaths of monsters every second. On the maps that feature infighting, your kill count often shoots up rapidly as you BFG everything while the monsters simultaneously duke it out with one another. It's chaotic and extremely loud and a bit of a sensory overload. It's such that when you're playing some of these maps and pause to get up and do something else for a moment, reality seems to run in slow motion as you adjust. The loudness, the speed, the intensity of a lot of these maps is sometimes overwhelming. It conveys that feeling of pain, anger, and confusion that we talked about earlier quite well. Doom has always been a bit of a tug-of-war between quieter exploration and secret finding, and loud and fast bursts of violence. I Can't Give You Anything cranks both the quiet and loud parts of the Doom experience to their respective extremes. In its loud moments, you're moving at 1,000,000 miles per hour, gliding through seas of dead monsters. Your violent eyes are darting all over the place. You're moving so fast. And then you hit 100% kills. When the monsters are alive, these maps are full of explosions and monster noises. They explode in volume upon starting them up, but the noise slowly fades as you hack your way through all your foes. Oftentimes, you can't hear the map's MIDI over the din. When you finally do kill them all, you're left with a preternaturally quiet environment. You can finally hear the MIDI. Now there's nothing to do but wade through all the monster guts to the exit. The contrast between explosions of intense feeling and activity and moments of calm feels homey to me. It's how the inside of my head feels a lot of the time. I don't mean to imply that these maps don't have any interesting gameplay at all. They are minimalist, yes, but they're not boring. Some of the encounter design of this set is pretty fun and unique. The very first encounter in the map set is against an archvile with a column at the center of the room. If you know anything about Doom encounter design, you're probably scratching your head right now, since an archvile in a room with a column is extremely basic combat design for Doom. What makes this example so elegant, by contrast, is the fact that the little column you have to hide from the archvile is untextured. It's a hall of mirrors. It establishes a core feature of the map set's aesthetic right away, while also making this encounter harder than it normally would be because it's harder to tell whether you're standing in a safe spot or not. The minimalist white floor also makes it a bit hard to tell as well. Immediately after killing the archvile, the walls disappear to reveal a whole bunch of revenants. Getting jump scared by monsters suddenly appearing is not uncommon in this set. It contributes to the feeling I mentioned earlier of the contrast between the slow and fast moments. Violence can strike when you least expect it, although having the monster count visible in the HUD kinda spoils it. Oopsie. For another example, let's look at map 6, whose name I'm not sure if I'll get in trouble if I say on YouTube or not. This map has 2 archviles right at the start, one for each, Anyway, your instinct is probably to rush one of the archviles and kill it before the other one chases you down. But if you go too far down either hallway, the map will spawn in 120 revenants. So your best bet to beat this one is to let the archviles come to you, and kill them using the walls in the center of the map for cover. Of course, you still do have to deal with approximately 120 revenants afterward. It's pretty tough to not die in the really narrow hallway that makes up this map. In general, I Can't Give You Anything loves to use archviles to control space. The very next map, Goth Girl Hands, has a bunch of archviles that can see you and attack you if you walk forward upon starting. But if you instead walk backward, you'll find the wall of megaspheres back there, and the revenants could come to you. Map 17, Always Got Her Head in the Clouds, has a ring of archviles standing up on pillars surrounding the exit, which gently encourages you to make circuits around the map and tackle all of the monsters, rather than just trying to book it for the way out. It's a very fun little encounter that captures a lot of the appeal of slaughter maps to me. In my eyes, a lot of the fun is in making circuits, weaving through narrow gaps in between monsters, and chipping away at them gradually. The more slaughtery maps in this set distill that feeling beautifully. A lot of the maps have an extremely hot start, but gradually become less scary as you get into a good circle or U-strafe. You get the maximum level of fear and disorientation at first, and then it turns to anger as you start to turn the tide on the monsters, and finally the melancholy as you walk out to the finish. One almost gets the sense that the player character feels ashamed for their outburst. I never thought a slaughter map could tell an emotional narrative on that scale, but I definitely see now that they have that potential. Most of these maps, however, are honestly beyond my skill level. I played most of them with id-DQD on. However, I do not consider my experience to have been diminished at all. I do think that in a more conventional map set, playing with id-DQD on changes the experience quite substantially, since the emotional narrative is mainly emergent based on player actions. When playing a typical map set, you lock yourself out of part of the emotions you typically feel when playing Doom by turning it on. This set, however, is different. Since each map has an emotional narrative regardless of whether you get hit or not, you still experience it. You still feel that wave of disorientation and confusion upon starting. No matter how much God mode you have, having that many enemies all notice and come after you at once is a little bit unnerving. You still experience the adrenaline and rage as you chop through all of them, and in the end you still feel that ever-present melancholy. I Can't Give You Anything is an astounding achievement in using Doom maps to convey a feeling to you, and the fact that it still sings loud and clear when played on God mode proves it. Truth be told, I really made my playthrough of I Can't Give You Anything at a perfect time. I started playing it right after releasing the Metroid video, and I had a lot of complex emotions about it. I was very proud of that video, and then upon releasing it, it did not perform the same way that my prior 2 videos had. I know it's not good to seek validation from external sources like that, but I poured more of my deep feelings into that video than any of the ones that came before. When it didn't get much attention, it felt like I was being ignored. I was falling into the curse of numbers that so many people go through when posting on this website. In addition to all that, I found myself feeling increasingly stressed in my day job, meaning that all aspects of my life were piling up in frustrating ways. Playing I Can't Give You Anything was a bit of a wake-up call, honestly. I feel that the emotional states that I Can't Give You Anything conveys are a pretty good summation of how my mental state usually works. Intense periods of emotion with periods of calm in between. It was a moment of catharsis for me. I really felt a lot while engaging with this work of art. It was helpful in undoing the funk that I was in. This is another work of art that someone poured a lot of herself into. I was overvaluing the fact that people had let my art cross their screens, while ignoring the fact that, if the comments on that video are anything to go by, that everyone who watched it really loved it. What's most important when creating art is that your feelings come across. The feelings in I Can't Give You Anything come through loud and clear and shook me out of my funk. It's certainly the only one that I've ever played that moved me to tears. I'll never forget that. I'm sincerely thankful to Maribel and her friends for creating these maps. They've since become intensely meaningful to me. She has said that every map in the set has meaning for her, and she chooses to keep those meanings for herself. Not only is this her right as an artist, it freed me up to find my own meaning in them. I found I Can't Give You Anything exhilarating, abrasive, difficult, but ultimately I found it healing. I Can't Give You Anything functions the same way that having a good cry does. At least to me. It lets you feel your feelings, wrings them out of you, provides relief. It's intense to be sure, and you might not see how good it is for you in the moment, but afterwards you really appreciate it. It's one of the most profoundly affecting works of art I engaged with in 2023. I truly cannot overstate my gratitude for that. Thanks for watching, I really appreciate you sticking around to the end of this one. I would really appreciate if you subscribe because the end of Season 1 of the channel is approaching very soon. Get hyped for that. Have a great rest of your day. Ciao.